he said, same chair always.
Alright, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working in oil painting awe. Okay, tonight, next step is a purplish magenta glaze over the skin tone, and I've mixed up some black to do her wing, which will, oh, there we go. I'm not looking through the lens. And that'll probably edge around here, and I'm going to make that pitch black and turn the wing itself into the starscape instead of merging a starscape into a wing. I think that will be nice. So that's the next step. Here we go.
Hunter's invitation. And stayed in Owl Farm, stayed in Aurora, and fell in love with the Roaring Fork Valley.
It was the Aspen Woody Creek Center of Literary and Intellectual Discussion.
Herman Melville said in writings at the turn of the century, he said, genius around the world stands hand in hand, and one shock of recognition runs the whole circle round.
John Cusack told me he went over there one time, and he was expecting Dr. Hunter S. Thompson of lore, and there was nothing going on. There was no booze out. And he said, what's going on? I was expecting. He says, well, so on the weekend there will be games.
He said, do you drink? Do you shoot? And I said, yeah, sure. He goes, well, I've got some things to attend to, a hideous rape case, affidavit I've got on it. But do you golf? Sure. So he put me out and gave me some whiskey, a shotgun, and he had on his porch a game called Shotgun Golf, where he had back where the monument is now, he had a little, green he had set up, and you'd take a bucket of balls and you'd hit the ball out, and if you could blow the golf ball out of the sky, then, that was fair. So it was kind of a pitch and putt with shotguns.
He always had his home base in Woody Creek. Any time in his life, whether he was traveling or not, he always had a sense of a home base.
During those years when Hunter was spending day after day on airplanes, checking in and out of hotels, interviewing people who were on the front page, he wrote this: "My main luxury in those years, a necessary luxury in fact, was the ability to work in and out of my home base fortress in Woody Creek. It was a very important psychic anchor for me, a crucial grounding point where I always knew I had love, friends, and good neighbors. It was like my personal lighthouse that I could see from anywhere in the world, no matter where I was or how weird and crazy I got. Everything would be okay if I could just make it home. When I made that hairpin turn up the hill onto Woody Creek Road, I knew I was safe." The word is Gonzo. It helped push Hunter Thompson into prominence, and it dug into the very end. He created a character, an attitude, a voice, and arguably a genre to deploy it, an audience to enjoy it, and an entire era to go along with it. At a pivotal moment in the American experience, he minted sentence after sentence that were more furious, funny, and just plain fast than anything else you could get. Many of us discovered him in Rolling Stone magazine, where Thompson formed a fruitful but combative relationship with editor Jan Winter. But the real birth of Gonzo came in the spring of 1970. To find his working method rendered whole, Thompson would have to return to Louisville and make the acquaintance of a seemingly buttoned-down Welsh illustrator named Ralph Steadman. The piece was called "The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved." The collaborations and the co-conspiracies would continue to the end.
From 1965 till about 1975, that decade, Hunter was a mother.
In 1970, Ralph Steadman, naive English artist, came to Kentucky to meet up with a Southern writer and interpret the Kentucky Derby. He knew nothing of Hunter. Hunter knew nothing of Ralph. and they kind of met, and it was a drinking binge.
That was my first visit to America, and I hit a bullseye. First time I found the most strange man in America. You know, it could have been anybody. Sort of a writer might have met Tom Wolfe.
When I wrote the introduction to the new journalism, which was kind of my manifesto on nonfiction, and I included him as part of the band, and his response was, "No, I write gonzo."
If you're thinking about the Cultural Revolution, the upheaval of the late 60s, early 70s, he was not only reporting it, he was part of it.
I'm a professional journalist, and I know the difference between a second-hand story and one of aggressive first-hand involvement.
What we were looking for in the Kentucky Derby was actually the decadent, depraved face of the Kentucky mint julep crowd, you know.
And he injected himself very much into his reporting, so the stories and he were almost one and the same.
After a week of wanton excess, the two of us went through it all, got ourselves in such a hell of a state, and looked at ourselves in the mirror and realized there's the decadent face. It was us.
I feel like a prisoner now. Not a prisoner, an embedded journalist.
He ended up talking about us. So he started to invent a scenario for his own kind of writing.
I think his main energy source was taking what we called journalism and making fiction out of it.
With an hour or so to kill before we had to catch the plane, we spread his drawings out on the table and pondered them for a while, wondering if he'd caught the proper spirit of the thing. But we couldn't make up our minds.
The truth in what Hunter wrote is in equal balance with the imagination.
His hands were shaking so badly that he had trouble holding the paper, and my vision was so blurred I could barely see what he'd drawn. "Shit," he said. "We both look worse than anything you've drawn here."
Where fact ends and where imagination takes over, you know, we never know.
We came down here to see this terrible scene. People all pissed and out of their minds, and vomiting on themselves, and all that. And now, you know what? It's us.
Well, great. How much for that good?
People ask, did he write fiction? Is it fiction or is it journalism? You know, there's this big blur that he occupied and even seemed to map.
I don't know if there's anybody who was a bigger influence on the way artists and thinkers and journalists saw the world.
He'll tell you the truth, but he's going to tell it to you in his own way. And because he is bodily so present in the story, you know, as a human being, enough to trust his voice, but also distrust and be skeptical at the same time.
Madness. It made no sense at all. I desperately needed the facts.
And he thought, why should I write about something that's sort of less than what I could write about if I don't include myself as this sort of big potato in the stew? You know, I like to say that. You know, there's like a giant potato in the stew, and the giant potato in Hunter's stew was himself.
The important thing was that there was no story until he got involved in it. He really wasn't interested in the actual nuts and bolts of a story unless he was a part of the story.
It's sad. But what's really sad is it never got weird enough for me.
He provoked a situation in order to get a reaction. And once he got a reaction, he knew where he was.
I moved to the country when the vote got too crowded. Then I learned that President Nixon had been eaten by white cannibals on an island near Tijuana. For no good reason at all.
What he was an exhibitionist and a man of enormous syntactical resources.
Most people can't handle the action on whatever they choose or have to call their own turf. And the few who can usually have better sense than to push their luck any further. That was always the difference between Muhammad Ali and the rest of us. He came, he saw, and if he didn't entirely conquer, he came as close as anybody we are likely to see in the lifetime of this doomed generation. Nice piece.
I think he was kind of a beacon for dissent, you know, throughout his whole life. He was a place people could turn to get a moral argument from a immoral outlaw.
I was a good criminal at one point, and probably still am in some way.
I said he was a fascinating sociological phenomenon, in part because of his capacity to attract so considerable a following.
Obviously, one of the things I have to appreciate as an American, and didn't that be stupid or insane, is that for good or ill, I can function here.
He was an old-fashioned anarchist. He did not believe in institutions, did not believe in, and that meant he didn't believe in even the institutions of the counterculture.
I don't think there are many societies or social political systems where I could function the way I am now. And perhaps a lot of people think it's much better. That's the best argument for destroying the system. It gets rid of people like me.
He had a sense of drama. His exaggerations, his hyperbole, his utterly unbelievable itinerary. So in that sense, he expedited people who were looking for dramatic potential.
No one categorization covers this new form unless it's Hunter Thompson's own word, gonzo. If so, in the 19th century, Mark Twain was the king of all the gonzo writers. In the 20th century was Hunter Thompson, whom I would nominate as this century's greatest comic writer in the English language.
George McGovern and Hunter, are linked throughout history by Hunter's, not only his work, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, but their friendship over the years.
He was always interested in the concept of evil and wickedness, and he frequently saw it in high places that other people had learned to live with.
Richard Nixon represents the dark side of the American dream. Richard Nixon stands for me for everything that I would not want to have happen to myself, or be around. He stands for everything that I not only have contempt for, but dislike and think should be stomped out.
For years I've regarded Nixon's very existence as a monument to all the rancid genes and broken chromosomes that corrupt the possibilities of the American dream. He was a foul caricature of himself, a man with no soul, no inner convictions, with the integrity of a hyena and the style of a poisoned toad.
Tonight, I again proudly accept that nomination for President of the United States.
I couldn't imagine him laughing at anything except maybe a paraplegic who wanted to vote Democratic but couldn't quite